By the time the moon stood full and white over Varenhall, the Luna had been calling for her husband since dusk, and the Alpha King had not come. Rowena marked the hours by the light that climbed the tower wall and pooled at last in the cold basin where the water had long since stopped steaming. Still, the doors stayed shut. The panes had begun gently, low, and far apart, the way old Maud had sworn they would. Now they came close and merciless, each folding into the next, with no honest rest between. And in the narrow spaces, Rowena did the only thing left to a woman in her place. She listened for boots in the corridor, for the weight of a tread she had taught herself to know across 4 years of a cold marriage, the tread that had once meant she was not alone in this watchful house. It did not come. "Send to him again," she said, when the wave let her have her voice. Maud's blunt hands never paused. "I have sent 3 times, my Luna." 3 times the answer came back the same. "Then, send a 4th. The midwife sent a girl, anyway, because you did not refuse a laboring queen, even when the errand was a cruelty." Before the door swung shut, Rowena heard what the whole of Varenhall must be hearing tonight. Music. Far off and gilded, the high, bright music of the Eastern Hall, where the court had gathered to welcome a guest. They had not come for her. She had never been what this pack wanted. She had arrived 4 winters past, as the closing line of a bargain between 2 tired old houses, an outsider chosen because she was convenient and would give the Alpha King an heir, without asking to be loved in return. She had kept every part of that bargain, swallowed the whispers, and told herself a marriage might be built of duty done well, that it need not begin in love to arrive there. She had told herself that right up until the woman came back. Coralie. Even the handmaids said the name softly, the way you press a bruise to find whether it still aches. The king's first love, gone these many years and returned now, unwed and lovely, in the very season his Luna grew heavy and plain. Rowena had seen her once, across the great hall, and had watched Torvald's gaze find the woman and stay, and felt the thing rise in her own chest she had no right to feel, given she had never once been handed his heart to lose. Another pain took her, worse than any before, and she bore down with her teeth shut and her fists knotted white in the sheets. And beneath it, she felt the child turn and drop and decide, at last, to be born. "Now," Maud said, fierce and glad and frightened all in one breath, "this one is coming whether the king does or not." And the child came, in a rush of moonlight and blood, small and furious and whole. Maud caught him and cleared his mouth, and he cried out once, a thin, high note that cut clean through the bright music below. Rowena wept without knowing it. Maud laid the boy against her breast, and Rowena looked into her son's face for the first time, and her heart, which had carried so much so quietly, stopped. His eyes were open. Around each dark center ran a fine, bright ring of silver, clear and cold as a coin held up to the moon. The door opened then, but it was not Torvald. It was the girl sent on the 4th errand, white to the lips, and behind her the music had swelled and turned toward some announcement, some public and glittering joy. She would not lift her eyes from the floor. "My Luna," she whispered. "The king is with the Lady Coralie. He has been at her side all the night. They are saying, in the hall before everyone, that he has chosen, that he means to keep her." She could not finish it. She did not have to. Rowena heard the whole great hall of Varenhall rise, as one body and cheer, and understood that on the single night, his Luna and his newborn son had needed him more than they ever would again. The Alpha King had chosen his first love and had let the entire world stand witness while he did it. For a long moment, Rowena did not move. The cheering went on below, blunted by stone, rising and falling like distant weather. Her son turned his face against her and quieted, and the silver in his eyes caught the moonlight and gave it back. And it was that, and not the cheering, that broke the stillness in her, because she knew those eyes. She had seen them once before, long ago, in a face bent low over her cradle, in the single memory of her mother she had left, a memory she had been forbidden to speak aloud for as long as she could recall. "Maud, look at his eyes." The old midwife had gone very still. She had brought this pack's children into the world for 40 years, and she was not looking at this boy as though he were ordinary. She was looking at him the way the frightened look at a thing they were warned of in childhood. "I see them," she said low. "You know what they are. I know what the old women called them." Maud wet her lips. "Moon in the blood. The silver line. I took it for a tale, to keep pups from the water at night. I believed the last of that blood died out. 3 lifetimes gone." She drew the blanket up over the child's head, hiding him, with a tenderness that did not match the fear in her face. "Listen to me now, and listen quickly, because we do not have until morning, Maud. A silver child is not a blessing in a house like this. It is a prize, a key 100 ambitious hands would cut off your arm to hold." Her voice shook and steadied. "Think on the shape of this night. The lady comes back after all these years. The king is drawn to her side and kept there, hour upon hour, exactly across the hours of your labor, so no one who matters stands at this bedside to see what has been born. Does that seem to you like ill luck, or like a thing arranged?" Rowena thought of the 4 errands sent and refused, of the music swelling at the very moment of the birth as if on a cue. Cold moved through her that had nothing to do with the night air. "It was made to happen," she said. "I would stake my life on it. And if it was made, someone already knows what your son will be. Someone wanted the king far from this room, and your place beside him emptied. And by dawn they will come to see the work finished. You cannot be here. Neither can he." Below, the cheering had softened into music again, sweet and untroubled. A court celebrating a king who had at last, after 4 barren years of duty, let himself be happy. Rowena looked at the small hidden shape of her son and felt 4 winters of swallowed silence turn slowly into something with an edge. She had asked for nothing in this house. She saw now how little nothing had bought her. She looked down at her son. He had stopped his crying and lay watching her with those impossible eyes, calm as still water, as though he had already taken her measure and found her equal to the night. Her mother had left her almost nothing, a face bent over a cradle, and one word kept like a coal all these years. She gave the word now to her son. Lucan. A small light, the old tongue had meant by it, the last spark off a fire everyone believed had long gone cold. It suited the silver in his eyes. It suited, she thought, a boy born on the very night his father threw him away, without once looking at his face. "Bring me the gray cloak," she said, "the plain one, without the crest. Whatever coin is in the blue box, the good knife, and the milk you set by." Her voice was steadier than it had been all the long night. "We go before first light, while they are still drinking to him." She let herself look, one last time, at the shut door. Somewhere past it was the man she had married, whose tread she had learned in the dark, and listened for through every hour of this night. She had come to Varenhall the daughter of a border soldier, taught to stand a watch and expect no rescue, and somewhere in 4 soft years of being a wife, she had let herself forget all of it and hope instead. Hope was the thing she folded away now. Small and neat, and set aside with the crested cloak she would not be taking. It was lighter to travel without. "He will wake tomorrow," Maud said quietly, "and find you gone, and never know what he let walk out of his house." "Good," said Rowena, and found to her faint surprise that she meant it. They went down through the sleeping half of the house, the half no guest ever saw, past the cold kitchens and the storerooms, to the low door where the night soil went out before dawn. Rowena had never once walked these passages in 4 years of being there. Luna, she knew them all the same. The way you know the back of a house you have been kept at the quiet edge of, and the knowing both shamed and served her. She should not have been standing. Her body screamed at every step, and Maud kept a hard arm about her waist, and half carried her when the walls began to tilt. The child slept bound close in the gray cloak, warm and impossibly light, the whole of her life reduced to that one small weight. There is a cartman at the low gate who owes me his youngest daughter's life, Maud breathed. He will not ask your name. He goes east at dawn and past the fish towns. The road runs into country. No lord of Varenhall has trouble to want in 100 years. Cold country, poor country. Country, where a silver child might grow up plain and safe and old. She pressed a folded oilcloth into Rowena's hand, and then a smooth gray stone, worn thin, a hole bored through its center on an old cord. My grandmother's. She swore the hold stones came from the silver folk, from before. I never believed a word of it until tonight. Wear it under his blanket. If the old tales run true, it will hush what he is, from anything that hunts by scent. Come with us, Rowena said. No. The old woman's eyes were wet and level. If we both vanish, they will know at once that something worth carrying was carried out of here. If I stay and weep and swear my Luna broke at the sight of him crowning his sweetheart and walked out into the dark, and that, whether she lived or died past the gate, not one soul can say, then they will have a sad and tidy story and no reason to look east. A story like that closes a door. The truth would open a hunt. She touched the child's hidden head once. Let them think the plain, forgotten wife could not bear it. Let that be the end of her. At the low gate, the air was black and bitter and smelled of the river. The cartman never lifted his hood or asked a single thing. He handed Rowena up among the empty baskets as though she were another load of freight, clucked to his horse, and the wheels began to turn. Varenhall stood over them, every window still gold with the king's happiness. Somewhere in its height was the chamber where she had lain 4 years a tolerated wife. Somewhere higher, in the warm lit heart of it, was the husband she was leaving. She reached once, without meaning to, along the old thread that had bound them since their joining, the thin, cold rope of the mate bond she had long ago learned not to lean on, because nothing ever answered when she did. For one instant tonight, something answered. She felt him, far and bright and utterly unguarded, the way a sleeping man is unguarded, and what came down the thread was not the triumph she had braced for. It was something, reaching and confused, an unease he did not yet have a name for, a hand groping in a dark room for a thing it has not yet understood is missing. It stopped her breath. It very nearly stopped the cart. Then the wheels carried her out beneath the old boundary stones at the edge of the king's ground, the grey hump stones that had stood there since before Varenhall had a name, and the thread went dark, not cut, not broken, only silent, the way a window goes black when the last candle is carried out of a house, so that anyone standing outside would swear the place stood empty, or that no one had ever lived there at all. Rowena pressed her son to her and did not look back. She let the king of Varenhall keep his happiness and his silence both. She told herself it was mercy, and told herself it was only sense, and did not yet let herself understand that the small, silver-eyed waif, sleeping in her arms, was a debt the whole gilded house behind her had just been fool enough to throw away, and that one day, on his own 2 feet, that debt would walk back through its gates to be paid. The cold country took them in and asked nothing, which was all Rowena wanted of it. For 9 days the cart carried them east, past the fish towns and their grey nets, into black pine country where the people spoke seldom and watched much. She fed her son, healed slowly, and let herself believe, for a while, that distance would be enough. On the 10th night, she learned it was not. She had made her bed in the ruin of an old drover's shelter, roofless but walled. She woke in the black before dawn to the child stirring, and to a sound the wind did not own. The soft, deliberate fall of large bodies moving through wet needles, circling, wolves, and not the 4-footed kind. These moved with intention, the way men move who have been sent to find one thing and have found it. There were 3. They came into the broken doorway on 2 legs and then not, shifting shape as easily as breathing, and the one in front smiled at her, the way a man smiles at the end of a long errand. "There now," he said. "A cold night for a lady and a babe so far from any hall. Someone will be very glad to hear you are found." Rowena stood, put her back to the wall, and drew Maud's good knife, knowing it would not be enough. She had been a border soldier's daughter before. She was ever a tolerated wife, and her hands remembered the knife. But 3 against 1, woman 10 days out of childbed, came out only one way. "Whoever pays you," she said, "cannot pay you enough for what you will carry afterward." The lead wolf laughed and stepped in, and that was the moment the dark behind him came apart. She never saw the shape of it, only its size and its speed, and the way the 3 became the hunted between one heartbeat and the next. It came out of the pines without a sound, and when it was done, 2 of the men lay still, and the 3rd was gone, crashing away through the black wood with a cry that thinned and did not return. Then the thing that had done it turned to her, rose, and became a man. He was tall, past the common measure, broad, scarred, across the jaw and throat with the white marks. A wolf does not give up its life easily to leave. He wore skins and rough wool and no crest, looked at the knife shaking in her hand with something close to approval, and made no move toward her. "You would have used it," he said, his voice low and worn. "Against 3. And still you would have used it, that is more than most manage." His glance fell on the dead man and his face closed. "Varenhal's marks are on them, under the hidden crest. You have run far from something, and it has run after you." "I am no one's lady," Rowena said, "and I have nothing worth taking." "You have a child worth 3 grown wolves crossing the whole cold country in the dark," he answered, and his gaze went to the small shape at her breast where the blanket had slipped, to the 2 dark eyes wide awake in the moonlight, to the fine bright ring of silver around each. He went absolutely still. It was not greed, nor wonder, nor the fear that had washed over Maud. It was recognition, quiet and grieving. The look of a man meeting again a thing he had long believed gone from the world. "So," he said softly, to himself, more than to her. Then he drew off his heavy outer skin and held it out slowly, the way you offer warmth to a wild thing you do not want to startle back into the dark. "My name is Bastian. These woods and the packs in them are mine. 2 hours north there is a fire, a roof, a door that bars from the inside, and women who will ask you nothing, come or not, as you choose. But you will not last another night out here, and neither will he, and whoever sent these 3 will send more before the moon turns." Rowena looked at the offered skin, at the scarred, quiet face above it, at the 2 dead men cooling in her doorway. She had sworn never again to trust her life to powerful men. Yet she had run out of the strength to refuse, and, worse, she found she believed him. "You knew his eyes," she said. It was not quite a question. You knew what they meant. Baston's jaw tightened, and for a long moment she thought he would not answer. "I knew them," he said at last, "because the last time I saw that silver, it was in the face of the woman I failed to save. Every year since, I have promised the dark that if it gave me one more chance to stand between that blood and the men who hunt it, I would not fail a second time." He pushed the skin a little nearer. "Come north. Before I have to tell you how many people are already searching for the 2 of you, and why not one of them means the child to live." Bastian's hold stood 2 hours north, as he had promised, though the hours were long ones, uphill through black timber, until the trees gave way and the hall rose out of the mountainside as though it had grown there. It was nothing like Varenhal. There was no gilding, no gallery of watching faces, no music. It was timber and gray, stone and iron, low and broad, and built to hold against weather, and worse. And when the doors opened to them, the warmth that came out smelled of wood smoke and bread and wet wool. Rowena, who had been cold in every sense for longer than she could say, felt her eyes sting at it and was furious with herself for the weakness. They gave her a room near the kitchens, small and plain and warm, with a narrow bed and a cradle already set beside it, as though someone had known a child was coming. The door barred from the inside. She noticed that before the fire, or the food, or the clean water, and she understood that Bastien had told her the truest thing he could about the place by building her a door she could shut against him. She shut it that first night. She kept the knife under the pillow, and Lucan in the crook of her arm, and lay listening for the tread of a powerful man, deciding to collect what he was owed, the way she had listened once, through a whole night of labor. It did not come. In the morning there was warm milk left outside her door, and no one at all waiting beside it. She drank it standing, listening to the hold-wake around her, the ring of the smithy, and the low voices in the yard, and somewhere a woman singing to a child of her own. And she thought how strange a thing it was to be frightened in a place that sounded so much like safety. The days folded one into the next after that, and Bastien kept his word so plainly that it began to frighten her more than any demand could have. He asked nothing. He took nothing. He did not crowd the doorway, or press his kindness on her, or wait, with that particular patience she knew from other men, to be thanked, in some coin she had not agreed to spend. A woman of the hold called Tamsin, young and broad-handed and blessedly incurious, showed her the well and the storeroom and how the smoke vents worked, and taught her all of it without once asking why a stranger had come to them in the dark with a silver-eyed child she kept always covered. "We cover our own, too, when the world wants a look at them," was all Tamsin said when Rowena's hand went to the blanket. "You are not the first to come up the mountain hiding something. You will not be the last. Keep him from the traitors at the gate, and the rest of us will keep our eyes to ourselves." It was Bastien himself who told her the shape of the danger. On the third evening, when he found her at the wall watching the last light go off the timber, he did not stand too near. "He must not show his eyes to any face that leaves this hold," he said. "The hold is loyal, the road is not. There are men in the cold country who would sell the memory of a silver ring for less than the price of a winter's meat." He was quiet a moment. "I learned that in the hardest way there is." She looked at him then, at the scars, at the stillness she had taken at first for coldness, and was learning to read as something more like a wound, held very carefully so that it would not reopen. "The woman you failed to save," she said. Who was she? For a long moment she thought he would not answer, the way he had not answered in the pinewood. "My sister," he said at last. "Ryan. She had the silver as your boy has it. I was away when the hunters came for her. I have been away one way or another from every soul the hunt has ever taken, and I have run out of ways to forgive myself for it." He turned from the dark. "So, now you know the whole of why I came out of the trees for you, and why you may bar your door against me as long as you like, and I will still be on this side of it, if the hold is ever stormed. It is not a kindness. It is a debt I owe, a girl who is not here to be paid." Rowena stood at the wall a long while after he had gone, holding her son, and understood that she had come into the keeping of a man who did not want her gratitude, because he had already spent everything he had on the dead. It should have reassured her. Instead, it frightened her more than the hunters had, because a woman can guard herself against a man who wants something. She did not yet know how to guard herself against one who wanted nothing. Below, in the last of the light, a horn sounded once from the ridge, high and short, and every dog in the hold came to its feet at once. The horn meant a rider, and the rider meant the world had found the edge of the mountain at last. He came in on a blown horse in the blue dark, one of Bastien's own scouts sent south weeks before, and Rowena watched from the gallery above the hall as he gave his news to the Alpha King, and the Alpha King's face closed like a door. She was not meant to hear. She heard anyway, because she had spent 4 years learning to catch the things she was not meant to, and because the hall was built to carry a voice up to the high seat, and did not care who else stood in the dark to catch it as it went. The hunt had turned north. A houndmaster named Vane, a man who tracked with wolves broken to the work and did not come home, without the thing he had been sent for, was quartering the cold country with a warrant and a purse, and what he had been set to find was a woman and a silver-eyed child. And there was worse folded into the news, worse that made Rowena grip the rail. In the south, the king of Varenhal had taken the Lady Coralie as his Luna before the whole court, and a new Luna wanted no loose silver thread from the old wife left lying about to be picked up and pulled. The child was not merely a prize, now he was a danger to a crown, and crowns did not leave their dangers alive in the cold country to grow. By first snow, he will be at your border, the scout said. By the snow after, inside it. He carries a writ that says, any hold sheltering the child forfeits its peace with the South. Ironwood has no peace with the South to forfeit, Bastian said. We never signed for one. Then the writ says any hold sheltering the child is at war with it. The scout's voice was tired and plain. It comes to the same in the end, Lord. You would be spending Ironwood men for a woman and a babe that are not your own. Rowena did not wait to hear what Bastian answered. She went down the back stair, with her heart going hard, and she found Doran, the Alpha King's second, in the storeroom, checking the winter meat as though the world were not ending, and she said the thing she had come to say before her courage could fail her. I will go, she told him. Tonight, if there is a moon, tell him I have gone, and he need not spend a single man of his on us. It was never his debt. Ryan was his debt. We are only the two who happen to look like her. Doran was a gray-bearded, unhurried man, and he looked at her a while with something she could not name. You would walk a babe not yet a fortnight old into a cold country with Vane's wolves already loose in it, he said. To spare the pride of a man who has decided to keep you, he set down the meat. I have followed Bastian since he was a boy who could not save his sister, mistress. I will tell you the one thing about him worth the knowing, and then you may do as you please with it. He does not decide twice. He decided in the pinewood. Your leaving will not unmake it. It will only mean he goes into Vane's teeth after you alone, instead of standing his ground with a wall at his back and his own men beside him. He turned again to the meat. If you want him dead, run. That is the surest road to it, I know. She did not run. She went back up to her warm, plain room and barred the door that barred from the inside, and she sat with Lucan against her heart and felt the trap of it closing, the old, unbearable trap, the one where staying costs other people everything and leaving costs them more. She had sworn on Coldstone never again to owe her life to a powerful man. She was deeper in his debt tonight than she had been the night he came out of the trees, and she had not agreed to a single coin of it. 3 days later, they found the outrider. He was one of Bastian's own, a young man sent to watch the low pass, and they brought him back over his own saddle in the gray before dawn, with the mark of Varenhal left on him, where a message could not be missed. Vane had not waited for the snow. Vane was already across the border, already inside the country. Bastian had sworn would hold, and he had sent his answer back on a dead boy so that the whole hold would wake to read it. They buried him at the tree line before the frost could take the ground. Rowena stood at the edge of the gathering with Lucan hidden against her, and watched Bastian speak the few plain words a lord owes his dead, and watched him look, once, across the grave to where she stood, and never once let his face ask her for anything at all. His men watched him too. Not one of them said aloud the thing the scout had said, that this was a boy, spent for a stranger's child. She understood that Bastian had forbidden it without a single word, and the understanding settled in her, like a stone she did not know how to set down. The clock Rowena had been counting had not run down. It had simply broken, all at once. And the hunt was inside the walls of the world with them now. Fear does strange work in a house. It made the hold quieter, and the fires higher, and the men slower to meet her eyes. And it made Rowena, who had lived her whole life braced for the blow, quiet in a way that felt almost like calm. She helped Tamsin salt the last of the meat. She fed her son. She waited to see what Bastian would do now, that a boy of his own lay dead, for her sake. And she found she was waiting, without quite admitting it, for the moment. His kindness turned at last and named its price. Every kindness had named its price. In the end she had only to wait for this one, to remember that it was owed. She heard it 3 nights after they buried the outrider. She had gone down for water after the hold was abed, Lucan asleep and warm upstairs, and the passage past the small council room was dark, and the door was not quite shut, and Bastian's voice came through it low and hard in a way she had not heard him use before. She stopped without meaning to. She told herself, afterward, that she had meant to go straight on. She did not go straight on. "The child is worth more than the hold," Bastian was saying. "You know it as well as I do. There is not a power on either side of the mountains that would not trade for what he is. Varenhal wants him dead. There are others who would want him alive far more than they want him dead, and who would pay in men, in walls, in whole winters of peace for the keeping of him. Then there is your way out, if you have the stomach to take it." Doran's voice flat. "Send word that you hold him. Name your price. Let the ones who would pay come and bleed vein for you. And Ironwood keeps its peace and its people both. The woman need never learn how the bargain was struck." There was a silence. Rowena stood in the dark with the empty jug in her 2 hands, and felt the floor of the world tilt very gently, the way it had tilted once before on a night of gilded music, and she understood that she had been right all along, that she was always right about this one thing. That there was no such creature anywhere as a powerful man who sheltered a helpless thing and wanted nothing at all for it. There was only the length of the wait before the price was spoken aloud. Torvald had taken 4 years to show her what she was worth to him. Bastian had taken a fortnight. That was the whole of the difference between the two of them, and it was not a difference that would keep her son alive. She thought of the door he had built her, the door that barred from the inside, and understood it now for what it truly was. Not a promise, a patience. A man does not trouble to force a door when he has chosen to wait on the far side of it until the woman within has nowhere left in the world to go, and opens it herself. She had mistaken the waiting for mercy once before, in another house, with another man, and she had sworn to herself on cold stone that she would not be schooled in the same lesson twice. She did not stay to hear Bastian's answer. She had heard the shape of it, and the shape was enough. She carried the empty jug back up the stair, and she did not weep, because weeping was a thing you did when a blow took you by surprise, and nothing took her by surprise anymore. In the small warm room she took down the gray cloak she had not worn since the pinewood, and she wound the holdstone's cord twice around her wrist, and she fed Lucan while he slept so that he would not wake and cry at the wrong hour, and she counted the coin, and she made herself ready the way a soldier's daughter is taught to make herself ready. Without noise, and without hope, and without waiting to be saved, she would not be in this house come morning to be bargained across like a good winter's meat. She had walked out of one gilded hall by dawn, with this child in her arms, rather than let powerful men weigh his worth among themselves. She could walk out of a plain one the very same way. Her hands did not shake as she worked, and that was the worst of it, the thing she knew she would remember after. 4 years of being nothing had made her very good at leaving quietly, and some small part of her that she did not like was almost grateful now for the practice. She waited until the moon was down. Then she unbarred the door that barred from the inside, the door Bastian had built her as the truest thing he could think to say, and she stepped out into the black passage with her sleeping son bound close against her heart, and the whole hunting colt country waiting somewhere ahead of her in the dark, believing, as she had believed once before and been proven right, that she was entirely alone. She did not know, because she had not stayed to hear it, that she had just turned her back on the one man on either side of the mountains, who had been on the very point of refusing every price in the world for her. The cold country at night was a different animal than the cold country by day, and Rowena had not gone a mile from the hold before it began to teach her the difference. She kept to the tree line, the way her father had taught her a lifetime ago, moving from shadow to shadow, with Lucan bound silent against her and the hold stone cold at his throat. The moon was down. The stars were fierce and many, and gave no warmth. She did not let herself think about the warm plain room behind her, or the door that barred from the inside, or the man who had built it. She thought only of the next tree, and the next, the way you think of the next step when the whole of the road is too far to bear the looking at. She had gone perhaps an hour when she heard him behind her. Not the hunters, him. She knew the tread even here, even now, even furious as she was, the way she had once known Torvald's across a marriage of cold corridors, and the knowing of it was a betrayal her own body committed against her will. She spun with the knife up. Bastian stopped a spear's length off, empty-handed, his breath smoking in the star cold. He had come alone. Of course he had come alone. Duran's voice came back to her, flat over the winter meat. He does not decide twice. Go back, she said. You will bring them down on us both. They are already down on us both, he said. You unbarred a warded door, and walked a silver child out into open country in the dark. Every wolf Vane owns will have the scent of it by now. The stone hushes what the boy is. It does not hush where a frightened woman has trodden. He did not come closer. Come back inside the wards. Berate me there, where the walls are at your back. Not here. I heard you. It came out of her like something torn. In the council room, 3 nights ago. The child is worth more than the hold. Others would pay in men, in walls, in whole winters of peace for the keeping of him. She heard her own voice shake and hated it. Name your price. You, as good as said, you are all of you the same. Torvald took 4 years to say it, and you took a fortnight, and the only thing I cannot forgive is that for a little while, God help me, I let myself believe you were the difference. Something moved across his scarred face in the starlight, quick and terrible, there and gone. You heard the half of a thing, he said, low, and you have spent 3 nights building the whole of a betrayal out of it, because a whole betrayal is easier to carry than the risk of being wrong about a man. I know. I have built a few of those in my time. He took 1 step, only one. I was not selling him, Rowena. I was buying him a wall. There are powers in the Old North that hate Varnhall more than they fear it. And remember what the Silver Line was before the hunts, and I have spent 3 nights on my knees over letters begging them to spend their men on a child that is nothing to them, so that yours would never have to spend his life running. That is the bargain Doran meant. That is the price I was counting. Not his sale, his shelter. She wanted, with a violence that frightened her, to believe him. That was exactly why she could not. She had believed a warm voice once, and lost the whole world by dawn. Words are cheap in the dark, she said. Every powerful man I have ever known has had a beautiful reason for the thing he meant to do to me anyway. Then do not believe my words. Something in him had gone very still and very tired. I cannot make you trust me, with the one thing you have left to lose. I would not trust me either, in your place, so I will not ask it of you. He stepped back, and to her astonishment he lowered his eyes. The way you yield ground to something wild. Go where you will go. But let me walk behind you, as far as the low pass, near enough to put myself between you and what comes, far enough that you need never once call it trust. Refuse me the wall. You cannot refuse me the road. It is open country, and it belongs to no one. And Rowena, who had armored herself against every soft word a powerful man could say, found she had no armor at all against a powerful man who agreed with her, and stepped aside, and asked for nothing, and it undid her so completely that for one moment she could not make herself speak. She had built her whole survival on a single, simple law that a powerful man's kindness was a loan, and the interest on it always came due. And here was a man refusing to lend her anything at all, refusing even to be thanked. Standing in the star, cold with his eyes lowered and his hands empty, and his whole scarred life offered as nothing grander than a body between her and the teeth of the dark. She did not know what to do with him. And that, she would think long afterward, was the most dangerous moment of the whole long night, more dangerous than what came after it because in it she very nearly turned around. That was the moment the cold country went wrong around them. The stars did not change and the wind did not rise, but every hair on her arms stood up at once, the way her father had taught her they would when the thing hunting you has gone, still because it no longer needs to move. Then the first wolf came out of the dark on her left, low and silent and already leaping, and she understood that the arguing was over, and that Vane had found them after all. What came next Rowena would remember only in pieces, the way you remember a fall, in bright shards with the ground rushing between them. The first wolf never reached her. Bastian took it out of the air, and then he was between her and the dark was full of teeth. There were more of them than she could count. Vane had not sent scouts. He had sent a pack, broken and silent and trained to the work, and they came out of the tree line in a grey tide, and one scarred lone king with no wall at his back and no men beside him stood in the gap and held it because there was nothing else in the world he would do. He was magnificent, and he was not enough. She saw him take a wolf by the throat and break it and turn in time to take another across his own shoulder, and the blood that came was black in the starlight, and still he did not give ground, because to give ground was to give the child. Rowena set Lucan down in the roots of the great tree at her back, and drew the knife, and went to stand in the gap beside Bastian, a soldier's daughter after all, and together they were still not enough, and some cold, clear part of her began to count how few heartbeats were left in it. She had been in a fight before once, long ago, at her father's side on a border that no longer had her father in it, and she had learned then, the thing no one warns you of, that a real fight is not loud, but strangely quiet, all breath and grunt and the wet sounds that bodies make, and that it is over very fast, one way or the other. This one was not over fast. Bastian would not let it be. He bought them, each, impossible heartbeat with a piece of himself, and she stood in the gap that he made and used the knife, the way her father's hands still moved in hers, and it was not enough. And it went on being not enough. Then Bastian went down. A wolf had his sword arm, and another had his leg, and he went to one knee, with a sound she had never heard a man make, and the pack surged for the gap he could no longer fill, for the roots of the tree, for the small bound shape that was the whole reason any of them were there. And Rowena, who had spent her life being told what she was not, who had been the plain wife and the tolerated Luna, and the nothing her own mother left behind with a single word, felt something wake in her that had been asleep since before she was born. It came up through her like cold light through water. It came up the way the moon comes up, without haste and without mercy, and it poured out of her into the dark, silver, and terrible, and every broken wolf in Vane's silent pack screamed at once and turned tail from a thing older than their master's cruelty, and ran. The light did not touch Lucan. It gathered around him the way a tide gathers around a stone. She did not aim it, for she had no idea how to aim it. It knew, the way the tide knows the shore, what it had come up out of her to protect, and it went there first, and hardest, and only afterward did it turn to deal with the rest. It touched Bastian, where he knelt bleeding into the frost, and she saw the worst of the wounds close under it, not healed, but held, the way a hand holds a door shut against a storm. When it faded, the clearing was empty of all but the dead, and Bastian was staring up at her from his knees, with blood on his mouth, and something on his face she had no name for, and, out of the tree line, drawn by a pillar of silver light that had briefly turned the whole night to noon, came riders. For one plunging instant, she thought it was the rest of the hunt, and she gathered the last guttering ember of the power to burn them from the world. Then she saw the banners. Not the grey and black of Varenhal, but a device she did not know, an old one, a silver thing, on a field of dark, and at the head of the riders, a woman in iron with grey-streaked braids and a face like a cliff, who took in the dead wolves, and the kneeling king and the woman still lit faintly with fading moonlight, and reined in and bowed her head. not to Bastian, but to Rowena. So the letters were true, the woman said. The old blood is not ash after all. I am Sigrun, and my house has waited 3 lifetimes to pay a debt to yours. Your wall has come, Silver Lady? It came as fast as horses could carry it. Her hard eyes went to Bastian, bleeding, kneeling, though it seems the Alpha King of Ironwood meant to be the whole of it himself, and very nearly was. And Rowena, standing in the ruin of the ambush, with the truth of every overheard word laid plain and bleeding at her feet, understood, at last, that she had run from the one man who had spent 3 sleepless nights buying her the very rescue that had just crested the hill, and that she had misjudged him as wrongly as it is possible to misjudge a soul, and that he had come after her into Vane's teeth. Anyway, alone, expecting nothing, exactly as he had promised at the wall, she went to her knees in the frost beside him, and did not care who bowed to whom. You came alone, she said. You would not have me at your back, he said, with the ghost of something that on a lesser night might have been a smile. So I kept to the road. It belonged to no one. But even as she reached for him, Sigrun's voice came down again hard. The Houndmaster is not among your dead, my lady. He broke and ran with his wolves, and a man like Vane does not run home empty. He ran south. She looked at the last light still clinging to Rowena's hands. You lit a beacon tonight that every soul from here to Varenhal will have seen standing against the sky. You saved this fool king's life with it. And you told the whole hunting world, in letters of fire 100 miles high, exactly what you are and exactly where. Before we go on, let us pause here a breath. If this story has taken hold of you, follow the channel so the next one can find its way to you when it comes, and then we will return to the cold country. They carried the Alpha King of Ironwood home over Sigrun's saddles, and for the long days of his fever, Rowena did not leave his side, and somewhere in those days, the thing she had held off, since the pinewood quietly stopped being a thing she could hold off any longer. Ironwood was a different hold with the old North camped around it. Sigrun's people threw up a wall of shields and stakes and their own bodies across every pass that fed the mountain, and the traders stopped coming, and the hunt's wolves did not try the wards again, and for the first time since that night of music and cheering, Rowena slept without the knife beneath her pillow. She did not decide to stop barring her door. She simply, one night, forgot to, and woke in the gray to find that nothing had come through it but the smell of bread, and she understood that the forgetting had been the truest thing she had done in years. Bastian healed slowly and badly, and complained of none of it. The silver light had held his worst wounds closed long enough to keep the life in him, but it had not made him whole, and there were mornings his sword arm would not answer, and he bore that the way he bore everything, in silence, at the window, watching his walls. She sat with him through those mornings. She had spent 4 years being watched by a court and never once seen. She found she could watch this one scarred man for an hour and see nothing but more that she wanted to go on looking at, and the discovery frightened and warmed her in the same breath. He talked more in those quiet mornings than she had ever heard him talk, which was to say, a little, in pieces, the way a man empties out a pack he has carried too long and forgotten the shape of. He told her once, without her asking, about the day he came home to find his hold still standing and his sister gone from it, and the 7 years he had spent afterward making himself into a wall, because a wall was the one useful thing left for a man to become who had failed at being a brother. She did not offer him comfort for it. She had learned, in a house where comfort had always been a coin, that some griefs are insulted by comfort and honored only by being heard. So she heard him, and that was the thing that undid the last of the distant between them. More surely than any kindness could have, it was an old woman of Sigrun's. People who told her at last what she was. Her name was Hesper, and she was older than anyone had a right to be, and she came to Rowena's room on the 10th night, and took her 2 hands and turned them over in her own as though reading them. You do not know, Hesper said. It was not a question. They kept it from you. Of course they did. A frightened child, who does not know she is a lantern, will keep her own wick trimmed low, and live. She folded Rowena's fingers closed over her palms. The Argent, we called your people, the moon in the blood. Once there were whole halls of you, and you kept the long dark off the world, the way a hearth keeps it off a house, and you healed what no medicine could, and you saw what could not be seen, and no cruelty could stand upright in a room that you had lit. And so the cruel hunted you. Because that is the first thing cruelty does to a light. They hunted you down the long lifetimes, until the whole world believed the last of you was cold ash. The old eyes were wet and fierce. And here you sit, in a cold country, at the edge of the maps, with the moon awake in your two hands, and a sun with the silver already in his eyes. Not the last of the Argent, silver lady. The first of them, come again. Rowena wept then, for the first time since the birthing bed, and did not fully understand why, except that she had been called nothing for so long that being called the first of something took the legs clean out from under her. She sat a long while after Hesper had gone, holding the word the way she had once held the single coal of a memory, the first of them. Come again. She had been the treaty bride, and the tolerated wife, and the plain Luna, and every one of those names had been a thing done to her by someone else. This name was her own. It had been in her blood the whole cold length of her life, waiting under all the smaller names for her to be free enough to let it up into the light. She wondered what else of herself had been waiting in her like that. She was almost afraid to find out. Almost. Lucan thrived. Among Sigrin's people, the silver eyes were not a secret to be smothered under a blanket, but a wonder to be brought small gifts. And Rowena had to learn a whole new kind of fear, the fear of a mother whose child is suddenly dangerously beloved. He learned to grip a finger. He learned the particular pitch of Bastian's low voice and would go still and listen for it across a room. And the first time the scarred king noticed it, noticed the silver-eyed air of a murdered line turn toward the sound of him the way a plant turns toward a window. Rowena watched something in Bastian's face break open that she suspected had been shut since a girl named Rian was taken while he was away. He came to her that night at the window. He did not stand too near, the way he had never once stood too near, and it was Rowena who crossed the space this time. Rowena who had sworn on Coldstone never again to hand her life to a powerful man, and who understood now that the vow had been the frightened low-trimmed wick of a woman who did not yet know she was a lantern. You built me a door I could bar against you, she said. I am not going to bar it any more. I know the cost of what I would be asking you to risk, he said, low. I would not blame you for barring it against me forever. You are not asking, she said. That is the whole reason I can give it freely. And she kissed the scarred king of Ironwood at the window over his walls, gently. The way you gentle a wild thing you have no wish to frighten, and felt him go still, and then felt him stop being still. And for a little while the hunting world and the gilded south and the long dark all waited outside the wards and let the two of them have the hour. It could not last, and both of them knew it, and neither of them said it. It was Sigrun who said it, 3 mornings later, riding in from the south wall with frost in her braids, and no softness left anywhere in her face. Thane reached Varenhall, she said. He told them what stood against the sky the night of the ambush. He told them the old blood is awake, and that the child lives, and where. She swung down from her horse. The king of Varenhall is not sending Vane north again. He is coming himself, with the whole strength of the south at his back, and his new Luna riding at his side, and he means to put out your light before the world can remember it was ever lit. Rowena did not run. She sat that night in Sigrun's council, the first council she had ever been asked into rather than overheard from a dark gallery, and she looked around the ring of hard northern faces, and the one scarred quiet face she loved, and she found that the frightened woman who had walked out of Varenhall by dawn, somewhere between the birthing bed and the ambush, she had set that woman down and not picked her up again. Everyone at this fire has spent a life running from Varenhal, or bleeding for the running, she said. I have run twice. I ran from a gilded hall by dawn, and I ran from this one in the dark, and both times I told myself it was to keep my son alive. And both times, all it truly bought was more nights of running. I am done buying nights. She laid her lit hand flat on the table, and the old silver came up soft under her skin, until every face around the fire was touched with moonlight. He is coming here, to put out a light he still thinks is a candle. Let him come, and let him find out, in front of the whole strength of the South, exactly what it is he threw away by dawn, and exactly who kept it, and exactly what it cost a man to go hunting the moon. For a moment, no one at the fire spoke. Then Sigrun, who had buried more of her own kin to Varenhal's long reach than any of them, put her scarred fist flat on the table beside Rowena's lit hand, iron laid down next to moonlight, and said, "The Old North is with you, Silver Lady, to the last horse and the last spear in it. We have waited 3 lifetimes to stand where you are standing now. We will not sit back down because the man who made the dark has finally come out into it." And one by one, around the whole ring of the fire, the hard hands came down upon the table, until the sound of them was like the first fall of rain on a dry roof after a long drought. They did not plan a slaughter. Sigrun's people could hold the passes, and Rowena's light could break a broken pack, but Torvald was not bringing broken wolves. He was bringing the sworn strength of the South, farmers' sons and lords' sons who had cheered a king at a wedding, and did not know they now rode north to make war on a child in his mother's arms. It was Bastian who said the thing none of them wanted to hear, quietly, from his place at the table. "You cannot burn them, Rowena. Not without becoming the thing they were taught to fear. The moment your light kills one frightened boy up from the southern fields, Vane's lie becomes true, and every hearth in the world will bless the next hunt." He met her eyes. "You hold a weapon that has never once been used against them. You can make them see. Do not spend it on their bodies. Spend it on their eyes." And so the plan was made, over 3 cold days. And it was not a battle plan. It was a plan to force a truth. Sigrun would hold the passes so that Torvald could come at Ironwood, by only the one road that ran beneath its walls, where a voice would carry and a light would be seen. Corley's whole scheme would be laid down where the southern host could not help but hear it, the returned first love who engineered a birth night, who drew a king from his laboring wife, across the whole of that long night so that the birth would pass unwitnessed by anyone who counted, who had an outrider of this hold killed and sent home as a warning. Who rode north now as Luna to finish the burying of a bloodline for the crown. It might one day have cost her. Rowena would stand on the wall with the air in her arms and her own light raised, for all of them to see, and she would let Torvald's own men look at the woman their king had thrown away by dawn, and at what she had become, and decide for themselves whether that was a light a decent man puts out. There was more to it than that, and Rowena made herself think it through coldly, the way her father would have. She understood Corley now. Entire. The way you come to understand a knife once it has been in you. The returned first love had not come back for a king. She had come back for a crown, and a crown cannot abide a rival heir, a silver one least of all. So Corley had made certain the child was born in the dark and unwitnessed, and when the dark was not enough, she sent Vane, and when Vane was not enough, she rode north in a Luna's silver to finish it herself. Ambition, of that make, did not stop. It had to be stopped in front of witnesses, or it only waited for the witnesses to go home. "It is a thin thread to hang a war upon," Sigrun said. "It is thicker than the one I hung my whole life on," Rowena answered, "which was the hope that a powerful man would one day choose me. I would sooner trust 100 frightened strangers to know a murder when they see one done in front of them." On the 6th morning, the watch horn sounded from the south wall, long and low and final, and did not stop, and Rowena climbed the rampart with her son in her arms and looked down the one open road and saw the strength of the South coming north under the grey and black of Varenhal, rank upon rank upon rank of it. More men than she had known were in the world, and at the head of them, small and bright and terrible, a king on a pale horse and a woman, in a Luna's silver riding at his side. She had walked out under one false dawn, she thought. Now the whole of it was riding back up the road to meet her. Torvald's herald cried the demand up at the wall, and it was the same demand cruelty has always made. Dressed in the same borrowed law, the woman and the child to be given down, the hold to be spared, the king's peace to be restored. Rowena, let it echo and die. Then she stepped up onto the rampart, where every man in the southern host could see her, with Lucan in her arms and the gray cloak thrown back, and she did not shout, because she had learned in 4 years of going unheard exactly how a quiet voice carries when a loud world leans in to catch it. "You know me," she called down. "Some of you cheered me once, the day your king took a plain outsider to wife, because a treaty told him he must. More of you never troubled to learn my face at all. I was the Luna of Varenhal for 4 years, and I asked you for nothing, and you gave me exactly that." She let the silence do its work. "Here is a thing your king has not told you. On the night I bore his son and heir, he was not at my bedside. He was in his own great hall, before all his court, choosing the woman who rides beside him now, while his wife cried out for him 4 rooms away, and no one came." The host stirred. She let it. "And here's a thing the Lady Coralie has not told you. That night did not fall out by chance. She came back after years away, in the very season. I grew heavy and slow. She drew your king to her side, and kept him there hour upon hour across the whole of my labor, so that no one who mattered would stand at my bed to see what was born. Ask the king's own guard, who carried her messages through that night. Ask why an outrider of this hold was killed and sent home as a warning for the crime of watching a road. Ask what a returned first love had to gain by making certain a silver child was never seen and never counted and never lived to be believed." She could see it working as she spoke, the way a crack works its way through river ice. These were not Torvald's household men, sworn to his person and deafened by their loyalty. These were the levy of the South, farmers and smiths, and the second sons of small houses, men who had left their own laboring wives and their own small children to ride north on a king's given word, and every one of them had a picture in his head now that he could not put back where it came from. Judith the Queen crying out in an empty room, while a hall cheered 4 doors away from her. A king may command a sword. He cannot command what a man thinks while he is holding it. And then Rowena lifted her hand and let the moon come up in it. It rose the way it had risen in the ambush, silver and slow and merciless. But this time, she did not loose it to burn. She let it pour up gentle and vast, until the whole gray morning turned to standing moonlight, until every upturned face in the southern host was washed silver, until the child in her arms shone with the same soft light as his mother, plainly, undeniably, a wonder, and not a monster. And the sworn strength of the South looked up at a woman their king had thrown away by dawn, and at the shining child in her arms, and made, man by man, the oldest calculation there is, the one about whether the thing you were sent to kill looks anything at all like a danger. An old man near the standard began, without seeming to know that he did it, to weep. A boy who could not have been above 16 let the point of his spear sink until it rested in the frozen mud. Somewhere far back in the ranks a single voice said, low, but carrying in the great hush, that this was no monster, and no captain moved to silence it, because the captains were all of them thinking the very same thing. The host wavered. She saw it waver. She saw spears drift and faces turn to one another, saw a captain near the front take off his helm, as though he had walked without knowing it into a holy place, saw the live vein had carried south, crack straight down its length in the space of a held breath. On his pale horse Torvald sat frozen, staring up, his mouth working on nothing, a man watching the whole shape of his life reveal itself to him at the one angle from which it could never afterward be born. For one bright impossible moment Rowena understood that she had won, not by burning, by being seen. The war was going to end here, on this road, with no battle at all, because you cannot order a farmer's son to put out the moon once he has looked full at it. That was the moment Coralie moved. Rowena did not see the small crossbow until it was already up, drawn in secret through the hole of it, held low against the silver Luna's robe for exactly this. For the one card cruelty always keeps in its sleeve. The card it plays when the eyes of the world have turned against it and it has nothing left to win. And chooses instead to make certain the light goes out along with it. She did not see it until the bolt was already loosed. And it was not loosed at Rowena. It was loosed at the child. Time went to water. She could not turn fast enough. The light could not gather fast enough. The whole vast moon in her was too slow by the width of a single heartbeat. And she knew it. And the knowing was the coldest thing she had ever felt in her life. Bastien was not too slow. He had come up the rampart at her back without a sound, as he had come out of the pine wood without a sound, as he had done every quiet unasked thing since the very first. And he put himself into the path of the bolt, meant for the silver child, the way a man puts himself between a wild thing and the dark, without weighing it. Because there was nothing left in him that would ever do otherwise. And the bolt that had been meant for Lucan took the Alpha King of Ironwood full in the chest. He went down on the stones of the rampart with the silver light washing over him, and Rowena caught him, and the whole shining morning she had just won turned to ash in her two hands. "No," she said. "No, you do not decide twice. You already spent yourself, for us. You are not allowed. Bastien. You are not allowed." His blood was on her hands and on the great cloak and on the pale stones. Dark and terribly ordinary, the same blood that any man has in him, spent in the one way she could not mend by spending nothing. All the moon in the world was awake in her, and it could throw a beacon 100 miles up into the sky, and it could not, of its own accord, undo the one small iron thing lodged in the chest of the one man who had never once weighed his own life against hers and found hers to be the lighter. He looked up at her with the fading light in his plain eyes and tried to say the thing he had never once made her risk, and could not find the breath in him for it, and Rowena knelt on the wall of ironwood with the man she loved dying in her arms, and the moon awake and useless in her hands, and understood that she had been given the one choice that cruelty had spent her whole life keeping out of her reach. The choice was this, and Hesper had told her the shape of it without ever meaning to, on the 10th night, turning her hands over in the lamplight. A lantern can pour out its light slowly, to keep the dark off a house for a lifetime, and a lantern can pour out the whole of itself at once into one dying thing, to call it back, across the dark. And a lantern that does the second does not always light again. Rowena did not weigh it. That was the thing she understood, kneeling there. That undid the last of the frightened woman who had walked out of Varenhall, counting coin into a blue box. She had spent her whole life being careful with herself, because no one else had ever once been careful with her, hoarding the low flame, trimming the wick, giving away nothing she was not forced to give. And here was the one man who had never once asked her to spend a single drop of herself, dying because he had spent all of his own, without pausing to weigh it, for her son, and for her, and for a debt to a dead girl that he had quietly folded into a debt to the living. So, she stopped hoarding. She laid both her hands on the bolt in his chest, and she poured the moon into him, all of it, everything Hesper had named, and everything the old woman had not, the whole awake and terrible tide of the Argent line, and she held not one spark of it back for herself. The light went up off the rampart of ironwood, in a pillar that turned the gray morning white to the edge of the sky, brighter than the beacon of the ambush, bright enough that the southern host fell to its knees as a single body and Torvald's pale horse screamed and shied beneath him. And in the heart of it, Rowena gave a dying king her own light to keep the dark off him, freely and asking nothing, which was the one thing cruelty had never once been able to make her do, and love had undone in her in a single heartbeat. When the light guttered and went out, the rampart was as dim as any ordinary morning, and Rowena swayed on her knees, emptied, the moon gone quiet in her for the first time since the ambush. But under her hands the bolt had loosened and fallen, and the wound beneath it had closed, and the chest under her palms rose, and fell, and rose, again. Bastian opened his eyes. They were his own plain gray eyes, and they found her face, and he was alive. Below the wall, the reckoning did not need her light to finish itself. The southern host had watched the returned Luna raise a hidden crossbow at the child in his mother's arms. They had heard the whole shape of her scheme cried up from the wall. They had seen a lord of the north give his own life to catch the bolt she loosed. And there is a limit past which even sworn men will not follow a thing. And Coralie had ridden clean over it in front of all of them. Rowena never learned whose spear it was. She only heard the sound the host made, low and vast and terrible, the sound of men remembering all at once that they had mothers and sons of their own. And when she looked down again, the silver Luna of Varenhal was off her horse, and the gray and black had closed over the place where she had stood. And Torvald sat his pale horse alone in the middle of all the strength he had brought north, and looked up at the wall. He looked at the woman he had married because a treaty told him, to the plain outsider, he had never once troubled to see. He looked at the child, the silver-eyed heir he had left his laboring wife to bear, unwatched, alive and shining and held. He looked at the whole shape of the thing he had thrown away by dawn, while his court cheered him on, and Rowena watched him see it, watched it go into him, the way the bolt had gone into Bastian, and understood that she had, after all, been given her reckoning, and that it was not his death. It was this, it was, that he would live. She had dreamed of his ruin. In the first hard nights out on the road, the way the wronged will always dream of the ruin of the ones who wronged them. She had pictured his hall burned to its footings and his crown snapped across a knee. She found kneeling there on the wall, with the living warmth of Bastian coming back under her two hands, that she wanted none of it anymore. Ash would have been a mercy. She wanted him to have the morning, instead, this one, and every gray one that came after it. Rowena, her name in his mouth was a broken thing. He had never once said it as though it weighed anything at all. He said it that way now, far too late, from the middle of a host that would no longer meet his eyes. I did not know what you were, what he would be. If I had known, you would have kept me. She said it gently, and the gentleness was the cruelest thing she had left in her, because it was true, and because it was finished. Yes. If you had known I was a lantern, you would have kept me for the light of me. That is the whole of what I ever was to you, Torvald, a worth to be counted, a thing to be kept, if only the price came out right. She drew Bastian up against her, and the scarred king of Ironwood rose weak and living at her side, and put his arm around his family, and did not say a word, because he had never once needed her gratitude, and did not need her defending either. This one never counted me at all. He built me a door I could shut against him, and then he stood out in the storm on the far side of it. You will spend the rest of your long life knowing the difference between the two of you. That is my reckoning. It is enough. And it is the last thing you will ever have of me. She looked out over the kneeling host in the plain returning daylight. Go home, she said to all of them, and not unkindly. The moon was never your enemy. It never once was. Go home and tell them the old blood is awake again, and that it kept the dark off you this morning, instead of burning you where you knelt, and let that be the story they tell of us now, in place of the one the hunters told. And the strength of the south rose, man by man, and turned, and went. And their king went south with them at the last, because there was nothing else left anywhere in the world for him to do, and the gray and black of Varnhall flowed back down the one open road, and it did not come north again. They buried no one of Ironwoods that day, which Sigrun said was the first time in living memory that the old blood and the hunt had met upon a field, and the old blood had walked away from it whole, and she said it ought to be remembered, and so it was. The argent line came back slowly to the world after that, the way a hearth comes back to a cold house. Not all at once. Sigrun's people kept the passes, and kept the peace. Hesper taught Rowena what a lantern is for, when it is not being hunted, which is a longer and a far gentler lesson than the other one had been. Rowena's own light came back to her too, in its time, low at first and then sure, though she never again hoarded it, having learned once and for all what the hoarding of a light is worth, set against what the spending of one is worth. Lucan grew. His silver eyes stopped being a secret and a danger, and became only the eyes of a much-loved boy, who turned always toward the sound of the scarred, quiet man he learned to call father, the man who had come out of the trees for a stranger's child, and then never once left. Rowena stopped barring her doors so entirely that in time they took it down off its hinges altogether, and used the good wood of it for a cradle. For the next one, the one with the ordinary dark eyes, whom Bastian held the whole of the first night, as though someone had handed him the moon itself, and wept, and did not say why, and did not have to. And on the far side of the mountains, in a gilded hall, still full of cheerful music, a king who had chosen his first love on the night his Luna needed him most, sat at the head of a court that no longer quite met his eyes, and grew old in it, and remembered, every single dawn of his life, exactly what had walked out of his house by one, and exactly who it was that had built at a door and stood out in the storm, and that was the whole of his reckoning, and it never once let him go. She had been thrown away by dawn as a thing worth nothing. She had lit the whole of the north by her own hand, and no one's leave, and she kept the door of her heart, in the end, for the one man who never once asked to be let through it. If this story kept the dark off you for a little while tonight, stay with me, and let the next one find you. Follow the channel, and I will leave a candle in the window for you.